In the remote valleys of Montana, beneath a sky split by a spring storm, a grizzly bear struggled through hours of pain to bring a new life into the world. But this was no ordinary birth. Her cub, a rare, spirit-marked grizzly with a pale golden coat, blinked against the falling rain for the first time. And then something happened, something so pure, so moving, that it would change not just the fate of one bear, but of all who crossed her path. This is a story of resilience, sacrifice, and the bonds that nature weaves stronger than steel. Stay with us, because what happens next will touch your soul in ways you never imagined. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss any of our unforgettable wildlife stories. Stories that remind us all of the strength and beauty living just beyond the trees. The late spring air smelled of wet pine and earth as the clouds pressed low over the valley. Deep within the folds of Glacier National Park, hidden from the well-trodden paths of hikers and rangers, Willow, a 6-year-old grizzly, prepared for the most critical moment of her life. Alone, exhausted, and battered by a storm that cracked the sky with thunder, Willow's massive body trembled with labor pains. Her den was a simple hollow beneath a fallen fir tree, sheltered by rocks and bramble. For hours she labored, instinct pushing her forward through the agony, the cold, the fear. Finally, with one last primal roar that echoed into the void, a small, damp form tumbled onto the mossy earth. At first, Willow could only pant, dazed by the storm and her own effort. Then she saw him, a cub, but not like any she had seen or smelled before. His fur was pale, not the deep chocolate of most grizzlies. In the dim lightning, he shimmered, almost gold. Willow nudged the cub with her great nose, clearing his mouth and urging his breath. The tiny bear gasped, twitched, and let out a soft mewl, curling closer to her warmth. And just minutes later, even as the storm raged, the unthinkable happened, movement in the underbrush. Fast. Desperate. Another bear. Another mother. A stranger. And she wasn't alone. In her jaws, she carried a second newborn cub, lifeless and limp. The mother bear, scarred, thin, and wild-eyed, stumbled into the hollow. She dropped the dead cub at Willow's feet and collapsed, groaning with a deep, sorrowful sound that no human ear would ever recognize. But Willow did. It was grief. It was pleading. In the dark, amid the thunder and rain, two mothers, one broken, one barely standing, faced each other. And Willow made a decision that no wild bear had ever been known to make. She pulled the other cub toward her side, tucking him against her own golden newborn, and began to clean his cold fur, warming him with her breath, willing him back to life. But would it be enough? Willow's great heart thundered in her chest, nearly matching the rhythm of the rain drumming against the earth. She licked the limp stranger cub with desperate urgency, rasping her tongue along his cold fur, urging blood back into his tiny veins. Her own golden cub nuzzled weakly at her side, but Willow split her body's warmth between them, a choice no wild bear would normally make. The stranger mother, a grizzly with patches of missing fur and scars clawed across her muzzle, watched with hollow eyes. She had done the unthinkable, approached another bear's den. In the wild, such trespass often meant death. But in her grief, and perhaps her hope, she had risked everything. Lightning tore across the sky again, and in that flash of white, Willow saw the impossible. The limp cub's tiny paw twitched. A rush of instinct bolted through her. Willow pulled both cubs closer with her massive forelimbs, sheltering them from the storm. She pressed her warm body against the stranger cub, her heartbeat steady, her breath constant. This was no longer just survival. It was a battle against death itself. Meanwhile, the other mother lay on her side, heaving, exhausted, her golden eyes locked on the tiny life she had surrendered. And then, a miracle. A weak, coughing squeak rose from the limp cub's throat. He wriggled feebly, seeking warmth, milk, life. Willow grunted low in her chest, a deep maternal call, and gently guided him to her belly alongside her own golden cub. She was a mother of two now. But survival in the Montana wilderness was never guaranteed, especially not for newborns, and certainly not for a lone mother burdened with two mouths to feed. Hours passed before the storm began to die. The first light of dawn crept through the heavy mist, painting the valley in muted grays and silvers. The stranger mother lifted her head, and with one last look, full of sorrow, full of something close to gratitude, she turned and disappeared into the woods. She would not survive the season. Some part of her must have known that. Willow was alone again, but not truly alone. Two cubs, one golden, one brown, slept against her side, breathing in tiny ragged gasps, fragile and new. They would need strength, food, and shelter. And Willow would need a courage she had never called upon before. Outside the den, beyond the safety of the hollow, dangers waited: wolves, starvation, and even humans, the greatest threat of all. For now, she closed her weary eyes and held her small family close, listening to their small, steady breaths. Against all odds, they had survived the night. But the real fight was only just beginning. Would Willow be able to protect them both in a world where even a single mistake could mean death? Spring in Glacier National Park was no gentle season. Though the storms passed, they left behind soaked forests, swollen rivers, and treacherous ground. For Willow, the days that followed were a desperate balancing act: find enough food to produce milk, keep the cubs warm, and stay invisible from the dangers lurking nearby. The golden cub, a rare spirit-marked bear, as later humans would call him, thrived quickly. His coat, almost the color of prairie wheat, gleamed even in the muted light under the forest canopy. Willow named him in the secret language of bears, Sunpelt. He was curious, strong-willed, always the first to nuzzle her or clamber awkwardly over her thick legs. The adopted cub was different, smaller, slower. His fur was a deep muddy brown, and a jagged scar, tiny but sharp, ran across his back leg, a mark of some injury suffered during his hard birth, or perhaps in the violent storm. Willow named him River, for he had come to her like a branch swept by floodwaters, broken, desperate, yet somehow alive. But love could not fill their bellies. By the fourth day, Willow's body began to fail her. Her ribs, already prominent from the lean winter, grew more visible beneath her shaggy coat. Her milk slowed. Her paws dug endlessly through the soaked ground in search of roots, insects, anything she could catch or scavenge. She dared not stray far from the cubs, who could not yet walk. One afternoon, driven by hunger deeper into the valley, Willow caught a scent carried on the breeze, the pungent, irresistible odor of flesh, something dead. Dragging herself through the underbrush with the cubs bundled atop her shoulders, balancing them like precious, living cargo, Willow found the remains of a deer, likely killed by wolves days before. It was half-rotted, barely edible by human standards. But for a starving mother bear, it was salvation. She set the cubs down gently and tore into the meat, her jaws snapping through the soft, decaying muscle. She gorged quickly, urgently, knowing every moment spent out in the open could spell disaster. That's when she heard it, a sharp crack in the woods. Not thunder. Not branches. A gunshot. Willow froze, blood dripping from her jaws. Her ears twisted to pinpoint the sound. The cubs squeaked, frightened, instinctively bundling together behind her massive forepaw. Voices followed, human voices, carried faintly through the trees. Two hikers, perhaps. Hunters. Off trail. Too close. Far, far too close. Willow's body vibrated with alarm. Her instinct screamed, flee. But she could not leave the cubs behind, and they were too small to run. Carefully, she scooped Sunpelt into her jaws, feeling his golden fur against her tongue. She nudged River with her muzzle, willing him to follow. But River, weaker, stumbled and cried out. The voices grew louder, and then a flashlight beam cut through the trees, white light straight onto Willow. For one frozen moment, predator and human locked eyes across the clearing. A man, young, bearded, clad in an orange hiking vest, gasped and stumbled backward, dropping his gear. Willow roared, a low, rattling growl meant not to threaten, but to warn. The humans bolted, crashing away through the brush, leaving their gear, their scent, and a fresh new terror burned into Willow's instincts. She gathered her cubs and fled, weaving through the woods, heart hammering against her ribs. Night fell hard and fast in the cold dark. As she huddled with Sunpelt and River beneath a fallen log, Willow knew this: the humans would return. And next time, they might not run. Could Willow keep her family safe when the enemy now knew where they hid? By the next morning, Willow knew the valley was no longer safe. The humans would come again. Their strange scent still clung to the bushes, to the broken branches, to the torn ground where they had run. And humans rarely left well enough alone. Some came with curiosity. Some came with bullets. Willow needed to move. With a grunt, she gathered the cubs, nudging them onto her broad back. The journey ahead would be brutal, over rocky ridges, through swollen streams, across open meadows where they would be exposed. It was a gamble she couldn't afford to lose. Sunpelt clung with surprising strength, his tiny claws gripping her fur, his golden coat bright even against the misty gray morning. River, smaller and still frail, struggled to stay balanced, his tiny legs scrabbling against her broad shoulders. Hours passed. By midday, Willow's paws bled from climbing sharp stones. Her stomach gnawed at itself with hunger. Still, she pushed forward, driven by something deeper than survival, the bond that had formed between her and these two tiny lives. They reached a narrow gorge, a twisting crack in the earth fed by a rushing creek. Across it, dense pine forests stretched into the distance. Safer grounds. Wilder places. Freedom. But the creek was fierce with spring melt, churning and spitting foam over jagged rocks. To cross it would be risking everything. Willow hesitated. Behind her, distant echoes, the rumble of engines. Humans coming closer. She had no choice. With a roar that was half courage, half terror, Willow lunged into the freezing water. The shock of it stole her breath. The current battered against her massive body, dragging at her legs, trying to rip the cubs from her back. Sunpelt yowled, his claws digging deeper into her fur. River, lighter, weaker, lost his grip. Willow spun with desperate speed, jaws snapping. She caught River by his scruff, barely managing to lift him clear of the frothing water. Kicking with every ounce of her remaining strength, Willow clawed her way to the opposite bank, dragging herself and both cubs onto the muddy shore. She collapsed for a moment, chest heaving, steam rising from her soaked coat. The cubs shivered beside her, alive, but terrified. She nuzzled them both fiercely, feeling their trembling bodies against her nose. They had survived the river, barely. But danger wasn't finished with them yet. In the distance, Willow heard a metallic clang followed by the barking of dogs, humans, hunting parties, closer than ever. She needed shelter. Not tomorrow. Not tonight. No. Her mind, driven by raw instinct and sheer love, scanned the forest ahead. Among the thick pines, she spotted it, a low cave carved into the granite hillside. Small. Hidden. Safe. Willow heaved herself up, gathering the cubs once more, and stumbled toward it. Behind her, the world she knew fractured, torn apart by hunger, fear, and the relentless intrusion of man. Inside the narrow cave, Willow pressed her body against the cubs, blocking the entrance with her bulk. She listened as distant shouts echoed across the forest. They were coming, and this time escape might not be enough. The cave was cold and cramped, but it was the only barrier between Willow's fragile family and the chaos outside. Days blurred together inside the darkness. Willow barely left, only sneaking out under the cover of night to scavenge scraps of food, fallen berries, grubs beneath the rocks, anything to keep her milk flowing. Sunpelt, bold and strong, adapted quickly. He climbed over Willow's legs, tugged playfully at her ears, his golden fur a pale flame against the dark stone. River struggled. He whimpered often, too weak to follow his brother's playful tumbles. His breath wheezed in the cold. His scarred leg, the one Willow had never been able to heal, grew worse. Each day, River's movements slowed. Each night, his tiny body pressed closer to Willow's warmth, as if trying to fuse with her heartbeat. Willow licked him constantly, grooming him, encouraging him to nurse. She growled softly to him in the secret way of mothers. She nudged him awake when he slept too long. But nature is not kind to the fragile. One evening, as mist curled like ghosts outside the cave mouth, Willow knew. River lay still. His breathing, once faint but steady, had fallen silent. His small body, barely a heartbeat's worth of weight, nestled beside her side, unmoving. Willow nudged him gently. Once. Twice. No response. She let out a low, keening sound, something between a growl and a wail, and licked his tiny head, smoothing the matted fur as if she could clean away death itself. Sunpelt stirred beside her, sensing the shift in the air. He whimpered, confused, nudging his brother's side. Willow stayed with River through the night. She kept vigil over the cub she had chosen, the cub no other bear would have saved. She remembered the first time she saw him, limp, abandoned, another mother's last desperate gift. She had given him days he never would have had. Moments of warmth, of belonging. But she could not save him from the deeper laws of the wild. At dawn, Willow rose. She took River's small, cold body gently in her jaws. With slow, careful steps, she carried him outside the cave and into the silent woods. Sunpelt followed, padding close to her side. Willow found a soft patch of earth beneath a towering fir. She dug with her massive paws, tearing into the loamy ground until she had made a shallow grave. She laid River inside, tucking him in with the same tenderness she had given when he first came to her. She sat beside the grave long after the wind covered it with pine needles. She mourned as only wild things can, with silence, with stillness, with an ache so deep it had no name. When she finally turned away, she did not look back. In the wild, love and loss were twins, one always chasing the other. Sunpelt nuzzled her flank. Life, stubborn, radiant, and fierce, needed her still. As Willow led her surviving cub deeper into the woods, she carried River's memory in every step, every breath. She had lost one. But she had saved him too. And now, with Sunpelt at her side, she would fight even harder to protect the life she had left. But would Willow and her golden cub find a future in a world growing ever smaller and ever more dangerous? The loss of River left a hollow ache inside Willow. But survival demanded motion. She couldn't stop. Not now. Spring deepened into early summer. The forest pulsed with new life, the heavy scent of blooming wildflowers, the sharp cries of nesting hawks, the distant rumble of rivers full of snowmelt. The world outside seemed oblivious to her grief. Sunpelt grew quickly. Each day he gained strength, chasing moths across the clearing, gnawing at fallen sticks, clumsily mimicking the digging motions Willow taught him. His golden fur glinted in the sunlight, a beacon among the deep greens and browns. But his color, so rare, so vibrant, also made him a target. It wasn't long before the humans returned. One morning, while foraging near a berry patch, Willow caught their scent, sharp, metallic, unnatural, before she heard them. She froze, muscles locking around Sunpelt, who scrambled to her side. Through the trees, she saw them, two men in khaki uniforms and wide-brimmed hats, moving cautiously, cameras slung around their necks, long poles and nets glinting in their hands. Wildlife officers, not hunters, but perhaps something just as dangerous. They spoke in low tones, pointing at something. At them. At Sunpelt. Willow's body tensed, heart pounding like a war drum. Her instinct screamed, fight. Protect. Flee. But Sunpelt, curious and young, toddled a few steps toward the men, drawn by the strange sounds, the glint of sunlight on their gear. A net whistled through the air, fast, missed barely. Willow roared, a full-throated, earth-shaking blast that rolled through the trees. Sunpelt flinched and scrambled back to her. The men raised their hands, speaking quickly, trying to calm her. But Willow knew better. She had seen this game before. She had felt the crush of human greed, the way they stole life even with kind eyes and open palms. They wanted Sunpelt. They wanted the rare golden bear cub. And if they captured him, he would never run free through these woods again, never know the river's roar, the scent of morning fog, the taste of wild berries still cold with dew. They would cage him. Display him. Study him. Maybe even breed him. Willow made her choice. She turned, fast, fierce, and crashed through the underbrush, Sunpelt clinging to her shadow. She ran harder than she had ever run before, weaving through trees, splashing through streams, vanishing into the heart of the wilderness where no human dared follow. Behind her, the shouting faded. The nets fell silent. By nightfall, they reached a high, hidden ridge where the pines grew so thick and wild that even sunlight had to fight its way through. There, Willow found an old den, not as safe as her first home, but good enough. A place to heal. A place to grow. As Sunpelt curled against her side, Willow lowered her head to the earth and closed her eyes for a moment. She had lost much. She had fought harder than any bear ever should, and still, she had saved him. Tomorrow they would search for berries, for roots, for water. Tomorrow they would keep living. But tonight, they simply breathed together, alive, defiant. Was it possible that in the heart of a fractured world, love could still carve out a place wild and free? Seasons turned like silent wheels across the mountains. Summer deepened into autumn, and the forest bled gold and crimson. Willow and Sunpelt grew leaner, stronger. The boy who had once stumbled through the underbrush now raced across it, his golden coat flashing like a sunrise through the falling leaves. They stayed hidden in the high valleys, far from the trails of humans. Willow taught him to dig for roots, to fish in the slow-moving streams, to sniff the air and know when danger lurked. Every day, she marveled at his stubbornness, his curiosity, traits that reminded her so much of River, of what had been lost and what had been saved. One early morning, frost still clinging to the ferns, Willow led Sunpelt to the edge of a towering cliff that overlooked the valley below. From there, they could see it all, endless forests, rivers twisting like silver threads, the snow-tipped mountains in the far distance. And on the horizon, far away but closer than Willow would like, the faint grid of human settlement, roads cutting across fields, smoke rising from chimneys. A world growing ever larger, ever louder. Sunpelt sniffed the wind, his small nose twitching. He whined softly, sensing something Willow had long understood. Their wilderness was shrinking. But it wasn't gone. Not yet. Willow watched him sit, his bright coat catching the rising sun, and something ancient stirred in her heart, something both fierce and fragile. She knew he wouldn't stay by her side forever. No cub did. One day, he would carve his own path through the forest, face storms, fight hunger. Maybe, if the world allowed it, find his own mate, his own den, his own future. And Willow, battered, scarred, and proud, would have to let him go. She had given him everything she could. Not just survival, but a legacy of courage, of resilience, of choosing life even when loss carved holes inside you. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of distant hunters, distant engines. Willow grunted low in her chest, calling Sunpelt to her side. They turned back into the trees together, vanishing into the dappled light. Somewhere deep in the wilderness, a place untouched by roads and fences waited for them. A place where bears could still be bears. Where love, raw, wild, and wordless, still shaped destinies. In time, Willow's steps would grow slower. In time, Sunpelt would roam farther, daring beyond the borders she had taught him to fear. But today they were together. A mother and her golden cub, a whisper of hope in a world that too often forgot to listen. And somewhere in the earth, beneath a soft bed of pine needles, River slept on. A quiet testament to love's fiercest gamble. Because in the end, Willow hadn't just survived. She had chosen to love. And love, in its purest form, is always an act of extraordinary courage. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. Share it with someone who believes in the wild spirit of life. Someone who knows that even in the hardest places, love finds a way.